All right, in this video, we're going to look at the gapminder population to look at two things. So we're going to look at the urban population, and we're also going to look at the share of people living in agriculture. I actually wanted to show you here the rural population, but gapminder, for some reason, I couldn't find that data in here. So we'll just show you the urban population and then know that the flip side of this is rural, right? So if you're not in the urban area, then you're in the rural area. There's only, things are divided into two possible sectors. So first thing we can notice right now, we can see that as we go upward sloping, so we go from like a very low income country like Madagascar or Ethiopia, I think Uganda was there somewhere, as we go to higher income levels, like up here to China, or all the way up here to the US or Japan, that the share of people in cities grows. Share of people in urban areas grows, and therefore the share of people in rural areas shrinks, right? So if we look at one period of time, then we can see it tends to be that the wealthier countries are more urban, and that the lower income countries are much more rural. Okay, so that's a general trend that we see happening. But what I wanted to show you this data was so I can show you how it changes over time. So the data set we have goes back to 1960. You're going to notice a few countries kind of come back and disappear. It's because there might be some years there was no data on them. But in general, so in 1960, only these countries up here are quite urban. So the U.S. was 70%, people living in urban areas. UK is even more. Japan actually was a little bit less than the U.S. But anyways, we see mostly it's a few countries in North America, a few countries in Asia, and Europe, which are quite urban, and they're also wealthy. That's the correlation there. And then the rest of the world is very rural. So here's China. China was very rural, so only 16% of people were in urban areas. India was very rural. Okay, so Asia is very rural. Africa is very rural. Latin America was kind of in the middle. So let me find it. There's Brazil, for example. There's Mexico, but it's still pretty rural. Half the people were living in rural areas, half in urban areas. Okay, but Asia and Africa, extremely rural at this point, minus a handful of countries. So let's play and we'll stop somewhere in the middle. Okay, so we see countries are developing, and as they develop, they become more urban. So in general, countries are becoming more urban, but it's mainly going along with their development. Oops, I meant to stop somewhere in the middle. Okay, let's stop here like 1990. Okay, so by 1990, the pattern continues. Same thing's going on. The wealthier countries, the countries with high incomes are urban, and they've become more urban than they used to be, but they also became wealthier if you compare to where we were before. And then the middle income countries, especially the lower middle, are kind of mixed. And then the low income countries are very rural still. So India and China are still down here. China was still, the economy was still not very developed at this point. And so we've got, again, mostly Asia and Africa who are low income countries at this time, and they also, who have low income countries, and they also have most of the people in rural areas. And so we're going to go up to the present time. So during this time, there's economic growth, and as we get economic growth, we got a lot of urbanization. So by 2017, if you compare to where we were at the beginning, things are quite a bit more urban. So that means quite a bit less rural. But it also, the pattern remains the same. It seems to track with economic growth. So as economies grow, they become more urban. And in this unit, we're going to be talking about why that's the case and what causes it, and maybe some issues that come along with it. Okay, so that's kind of our goal in this unit. And we're also going to be talking about other things that the rural areas kind of provide to support economic development overall. Talking about this with the log scale. So remember down here at the bottom, each line shows a doubling of income, right? So it gets rid of that diminishing returns kind of thing. So let's just show, I just want to show you so it's comparable to what you were seeing in the book. If we change this to a linear scale, therefore the bottom is just like a normal scale, each time goes up by 10,000, then we get this thing where almost all the action happens at the beginning, right? So in the first, going from very, very poor to what's considered middle income is where a big part of the action in terms of urbanizing happens. And then after countries get to around this 20,000 mark, the changes are much, much smaller. And China's actually a little bit low compared to the other countries with similar income, and there's some structural reasons for that, which we'll mention briefly in the unit. Okay, so again, we play this again, same as things going on as before, but the big difference is that most of the action happens in the first around $10,000 to $15,000 worth of income. And after that, the changes are much, much, much smaller. Okay. So anyways, you can see that more clearly when you put it on the linear scale, but the log scale is kind of nice just to see that it has this clear pattern.